Hi, this is a video lecture for the digestive system. So the digestive system we probably have a fair bit of familiarity with because we all eat, we all digest that food, and we all eliminate the waste from digestion. So this is something I feel like we have a fair bit of intimacy with, as opposed to some of our other systems where we might not really be aware of what's happening in them. But the digestive system I think hits a little closer to home since we all experience it so closely. So the digestive system consists of the mouth. The mouth has teeth and the tongue, the esophagus, the stomach, the small intestines, the large intestines, and accessory glands. So, what are accessory glands? Well, there's a few. So, we've got the salivary glands. Big surprise, these guys make saliva. And saliva is important to moisten and lubricate food. So maybe you've had some really dry food to eat. Like if you have like, saltine kind of crackers or soda crackers in your house, try to eat a few, and you'll see like they really absorb up that saliva really quickly, and it's like really difficult to chew and swallow those crackers. So saliva is really important to get the food moist and to lubricate it for swallowing. Another accessory gland is the pancreas. So the pancreas produces digestive enzymes. And we'll get into a little bit more detail with those in a little bit. Digestive enzymes are responsible for digesting food into smaller nutrients that the body can use. And then we have the liver, which produces bile. So I'll put bile production. And then bile, just as a note, bile is stored in the gallbladder. The liver also is responsible for detoxification. So it processes drugs in the body. It helps to purify if there's any toxins in the blood. And then the liver also stores and modifies nutrients. So nutrients are what the body needs basically for function. So the liver is able to store nutrients in excess, and it's able to modify nutrients as well into usable energy for the body. So let's start with the mouth then. Let's start talking the mouth. So in the mouth, we know there are teeth. So you should know that cats have 30 adult teeth. Dogs have 42, and this is adult teeth for both. There are 4 different types of teeth. There are the incisors, which are like the frontmost teeth. Those are used for like biting, basically cutting. I think incisors kind of sounds like scissors, and for like cutting food. There's the canines, and yes, they're called canines even if it's a cat and even if it's a human. There's premolars, and there's molars. So those are the 4 tooth types. I should add those onto the bright space. But I do have some teeth diagrams for you. I can add into the bright space, and you can see kind of diagrams of what the mouths look like. So how many incisors, how many premolars, molars, canines make up the 30 and the 42. So I'll post those for you as well. One term you should know for animals is the carnassial. I just want to make sure you can see this if I write it. Carnassial tooth. So the carnassial tooth is just the largest tooth on the side of the upper and the lower. So kind of like the cheek teeth there. So in dogs, it's their upper premolar, their fourth premolar, and then their lower first molar. In cats, it's their upper premolar, the third one, and their lower molar. So again, we'll be able to see those on those tooth diagrams. So I'll put those onto the bright space so you guys can have a look at those carnassial. So they're just like basically the largest teeth in the mouth is called the carnassial tooth or teeth. Okay, so I pre-drew a diagram of tooth structure. So let's go over the parts of the tooth. So first of all, let's talk about the delineations here. So everything that's above the gum line that we can see is called the crown. Everything that's between the bone and the top of the gingiva is the neck of the tooth. And then everything below is the root. Okay, so the tooth has basically like kind of three parts to it. So the outermost part is the enamel. Whoops. Enamel. So this is the hardest part of the tooth. And it makes sense that we would want the outermost part of the tooth to be the hardest part, because that's the part that's interacting with our food or anything else that we're chewing. So, you know, dogs, that could be like rocks or bones or God knows what else. Dogs often tend to chew lots of different things. So we want that enamel to be the hardest part of the tooth. The inside that makes up the bulk of the tooth is called dentin. And then in the very middle here, we have the pulp cavity. And in here, there are blood vessels and nerves. So as you can imagine, if you have a fractured tooth where there's pulp exposure, that's going to be really painful for the animal because we have those blood vessels and nerves kind of just exposed to the outside world. So any fractured tooth should probably be removed to prevent excessive pain in the animal. Okay, so then outside of the tooth itself, up here we've got the gingiva. The gingiva are the gums. And then below the gingiva we have the jawbone. And then the gingiva kind of makes like these little kind of pocket areas here by the teeth. And this right there is called the gingival sulcus. So a sulcus is basically like a depression or a groove. So the gingival sulcus is just that. It's that little groove between the gums and the teeth. So think, I hope you guys have, I hope you guys floss. So when you're flossing, basically the floss is going into the gingival sulcus. And then what's holding the tooth in place to the jawbone? So tooth and jawbone are connected by these guys here, which are periodontal ligaments. So remember, ligaments are those strong fibrous bands. They connect bone to bone, or they support organs. So in this case, the bone of the tooth to the bone of the jawbone, the periodontal ligament is attaching the two. Okay. So that is basically a diagram of the tooth structure. I never labeled this, so tooth structure. So in the mouth, we do have mouth-specific directional terms. I'm just going to flip this over here. Oh, sorry, I guess in the mouth, directional terms. So just like just why we need the word rostral to describe things on the head, inside the mouth we can't really use cranial and caudal or ventral and dorsal. So we're going to use terms like lingual. Lingual means toward the tongue. Maybe I'm just going to draw a quick little thing here. So if this is all the teeth, this is much more like a human mouth, but just for illustrative purposes. And then here's the tongue. So this is the lingual aspect of the teeth, okay? So like the back portion that's in, like facing towards the tongue. Then we've got the buccal, which is toward the cheek. So that this side out here would be buccal. Then we have labial, and that means toward the lips. So this would be like basically this front portion here would be labial. And then lastly we have, sorry, I'm just gonna move it over here, occlusal, and that's the flat chewing surface. So up here, this part, all these, that's the occlusal surface. So that's the flat part that does the chewing. So in the mouth, we have specific directional terms that that we can give information about what portion of the tooth. So let's say there's gum recession, it's on the buccal aspect. Or maybe there's a growth underneath one of these teeth, like in the gingiva, we could say it's, you know, below premolar 4 on the lingual aspect. Or again, we could talk about the labial or the occlusal, okay? So those are the in the mouth directional terms. Okay, so let's talk about the digestive system now as a whole. We've kind of focused on the mouth at first, but now we're going to talk about the rest of the system. So this is a really well drawn picture of a dog, obviously. I'm certainly an artist, as you can tell. I'm just teasing. I don't think it's the best drawing, but it'll get the job done here. So I'm just going to draw a little cheeseburger here. That's what our dog is going to eat. So we're going to walk you through the digestion process from, food outside the body to poop leaving the body. So we start in the mouth. Obviously, that's the mouth, okay? So in the mouth, we have teeth for chewing. We have the tongue for moving food. So these little spiky guys are my teeth. This thing here is the tongue. And we have the salivary glands that produce saliva. And remember, that's for moistening the food and for lubrication. So these are my salivary glands. So maybe next time you're eating a snack or having a meal, pay attention to what's going on inside your mouth. So your teeth are chewing the food, and you'll see how much your tongue is involved in, like, basically kind of stirring up the food to make sure that all the parts get chewed properly. And then pay attention to what your tongue does while you're swallowing. The tongue has such an important role in what goes on in the mouth. And we don't even really pay attention closely to what it's doing. It just does its thing, right? So pay attention and see. It's really intricate and it's really interesting, I think. And just as a note, our salivary glands, we can feel those kick into action. So if you haven't had something to eat for a while and you maybe think of something delicious, or you think of something maybe sour, often you can feel those salivary glands kick into action, and you'll start drooling a little bit. So the salivary glands we can kind of, we can feel as well. Okay, so after the mouth we have the esophagus. So once the food has been chewed up and swallowed, the food gets swallowed into the esophagus. So this is a muscular tube that transports food from the mouth to the stomach. And that's it for the esophagus. It has a really important role, but not much else to say about that one. So then we get into the stomach. So our stomach is right here. So the stomach is a muscular sac. It has little ridges inside, kind of like a washboard, that helps to really smooth out that food. So even if you swallowed food without chewing it, the stomach is going to help to break it down into smaller pieces. The stomach turns the food into chyme. So chyme is a mix of semi-digested food, saliva, enzymes, and HCl, which is hydrochloric acid. So the hydrochloric acid is added in the stomach. The stomach makes that hydrochloric acid and adds it in to start breaking food down in the stomach. So chyme basically is really like a paste, right? So we don't want big large chunks of food going into the intestines, because the intestines aren't going to be able to do mechanical digestion. So mechanical digestion is chewing and breaking food down into small pieces. The intestines are responsible for doing kind of more of the molecular digestion, where we break large chains of proteins into amino acids and etc. Okay, so the stomach does have like a really cool mucus coating so that this hydrochloric acid doesn't digest the proteins of the stomach. Obviously that's important. Sometimes you hear about people or animals that have stomach ulcers or gastric ulcers, and that is an area where that mucus has kind of worn through, and the hydrochloric acid is actually attacking the protein and the walls of the stomach. So that's obviously not a good thing. Okay, so let's talk about the small intestines now. So the small intestines are all these guys here. So basically between the stomach and right here where the large intestine kicks in is the small intestines. So in real life, in an actual animal, there's quite a bit of length to the small intestines. I just kind of drew a little picture here for our purposes, but it is quite long and twisty in there. So there are 3 parts to the small intestine. There is the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum. So make sure you know how to spell all 3 of these parts. Remember that ileum, if it's spelt with an I instead of an E, is referring to the hip bone, right? So make sure you pay close attention that E is for the intestines. So there's 3 different parts. The jejunum here is where most nutrient absorption takes place. So in the small intestine, food has exited the stomach, and now, or I guess chyme has exited the stomach and is moving into the small intestines. So right here is where the pancreas is going to add in digestive enzymes. So that's the pancreas right there. So it's just a small kind of little organ tucked up close to the stomach and the intestines. So the pancreas adds in digestive enzymes. You need to know the names of a few of them. So amylase digests carbohydrates. Lipase digests fats. And protease digests protein. So we'll get into more details on the whole digestive portion when we talk in nutrition. But you should know amylase is carbohydrates, lipase is fats, protease is protein, okay? You know, so all the A's, when a word ends in A's, it just means it's an enzyme. So if you can remember that protein is protein, right? It's the same first 5 letters in both. Lipe, we remember our word parts is for fat, and then you just have to remember amylase. And then we also have the liver doing something here. It's adding bile. And bile is a fat emulsifier. So to emulsify fat means to break fat down into smaller little globules. So think of when you have a really greasy dish. So, I don't know, you fried some bacon or something and now you need to wash that pan. If you just add water to it, it's just going to turn into a big grease cloud, right? Like it's not going to break down the grease. But if you add a little bit of like Dawn dish soap, that dish soap acts as an emulsifier. It breaks the fat up into smaller globules and allows you to wash it then off the pan and, you know, down your drain. So bile does the same kind of thing in the intestines. We don't want large, huge globs of fat traveling through the intestine. The liver adds the bile in. The bile breaks the fat down into smaller globules, and then lipase can work on those smaller chunks of it. So we don't want huge globs of fat. We want like little fat globules, little small ones. And then this guy here is the liver. Sorry, I feel like these arrows are getting a bit messy, but that's the liver there. So it's kind of just like up above the stomach. And then bile is stored in the gallbladder, which is in the liver. Okay? So once we've traveled through the duodenum and then the jejunum and then the ileum, we've now reached the large intestine. So in the large intestine, large intestine is also known as the colon. So the large intestine is responsible for absorbing water and electrolytes. So nutrient absorption, that's happening in the small intestines. Water absorption is happening in the large intestines. It is also responsible for fermenting fiber. So if you know anything about nutrition already, you know, just from having to feed yourself or feeding your animals, or if you have children, feeding your children, you know that fiber is an important part of your diet. So some fiber is digestible, but most of the fiber that we're talking about here isn't really a digestible fiber. It's adding bulk. But the fiber that is fermentable is fermented in the large intestines by the probiotic bacteria in there. So that's those good bacteria, or the microbiome in the large intestine. So those guys ferment the fiber. And then, so this last little portion here of the large intestine, I forgot to label the large intestine, is the rectum. And the rectum is responsible for storing feces until there's enough that kind of triggers the response in the brain to have to empty the intestines. So the rectum has something in there called stretch receptors. So as feces enters the rectum and starts to build up in there, it'll activate those stretch receptors, and that will signal to the animal it's time to move the bowels and evacuate. So the rectum stores the feces until there's enough basically to tell the body, hey, let's get this out. And then lastly, we have the anus. Whoops, anus. So the anus is a muscular sphincter. A sphincter is just like a circular muscle that can contract or open, okay? So that's a sphincter. And it's responsible for expelling feces. Okay? So, from the point of hamburger to the point of leaving the body as feces, total food transit time. Whoops, total. This is supposed to be an L, not a T, sorry. Total food transit time. So we're talking from eating to feces is about 1 to 2 days. So that seems fairly quick, right? You eat the cheeseburger, and then within the next day to two, all the waste has left the body from that cheeseburger. But to give you a little bit of perspective on how much of that time is spent in the small intestines and rectum, so mouth to stomach is only about like 1 to 2 hours. So within 2 hours after eating, the stomach should be empty. So that means that the remaining like 46 hours is spent in the small intestines, nutrient absorbing, and in the rectum absorbing water and electrolytes, and then fermenting the fiber. So this is an important number to know, that 1 to 2 hours, because sometimes you have to give owners instructions on medications to give the medications on an empty stomach. So when is the stomach empty? So you can give it up to an hour before a meal, or you can give it 2 hours after a meal. So we don't want to be giving food that needs to be given on an empty stomach nearer to the meal than the 2 hours, okay? And then another thing we need to know that for is if an animal eats something that they shouldn't have, so some kind of toxin, so maybe they had like some chocolate or grapes, something that could be, cause toxin problems in the animal. So we could induce vomiting in those animals if they've eaten the food within that like 1 to 2 hour range, okay? So if they ate, oh my God, you get the phone call, oh my God, my dog ate some chocolate, he just ate it. We can say, okay, let's get him vomiting. It's like, oh my God, I got home from work and this box of chocolates is totally destroyed. I have no idea when my dog ate it. Okay, we have to take a different approach. We can't just assume that we can make the dog vomit and they'll bring up all the chocolate. We have to assume that there is some in the small intestines then, okay? So that gives us kind of a bit of a guideline there. And then just an interesting fact for you, if you have like a horse or a rodent / rat owner or a rabbit or a guinea pig owner call, and their animal has eaten something that they should have, we can't recommend that we make these guys vomit because these guys can't vomit. So they're just physiologically unable to vomit. So we can induce vomiting for these guys. We need to approach toxin ingestion in a little bit of a different way for these guys. Okay, so that's everything I have to share about the digestive system with you guys. You do have textbook pages that you can read about the digestive system. I don't think it gets into as big a details about the teeth, but it definitely talks about the digestive system in general. So you're looking at pages 86 to 88 in your Elsevier textbook, and then it's covered on chapter 11 in your McBride textbook. And then as well, I do have a digestive system practice activity for you guys, so you're certainly welcome to work on that as a little bit of a review. And of course, as always, if you do have any questions at all, please make sure to ask in the virtual chat or the virtual classroom, in the chat, or email me. I certainly want to make sure that you guys do understand, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have. All right, well, thanks so much for sticking around and listening, and we'll see you in the virtual classroom. Bye-bye.